Welcome to Channel 24. Davos is unfolding amid intense behind-the-scenes diplomacy over Russia's war against Ukraine. While officials talk about possible talks and final stages, Russia's stated war goals remain unchanged, raising questions about what these signals really mean. Joining me now is Garry Kasparov, a world chess champion and one of the strongest and most consistent critics of the Kremlin. Garry, welcome. It's my pleasure to have you here in our studio.
Yes, always happy to join you.
Garry, so Davos continues. This is my first time for many, many years when I'm not there, but I'm just watching everything online. And Jared Kushner says the end of the war is near. President Zelensky just an hour ago said that the peace agreement and documents are almost ready. Trump's envoy Steve says negotiations are at a final stage. But let's be honest, Russia's officials' war goals have not changed since 2022, since 2014 even. So if talks are truly near the end, why hasn't Putin publicly revised those goals?
Yeah, it's the same song that we have been hearing for quite a while. As we remember, Donald Trump promised to end the war in 24 hours. And that's probably the same level of promise as Putin's idea to take Kyiv in 3 days. So the war is almost the full-scale invasion, not counting, of course, the beginning of the war in February 2014. But the full-scale invasion it's nearing its 4 years. 4 years. I think you could be a billionaire if you bet, back in 2022 that the war would go over a year or 2 years. But somehow it became a part of the landscape. So you mentioned Davos now. I'm not a guest in Davos. I think it's a total waste of time. But I regularly attend a Munich Security Conference since Russia has been expelled. So people like me, they were welcome there. And it will be again fourth year of the same conversation. So it's while we hear now in Davos these noises that it's almost ready. I wish we could reach this point, but I still want to understand, what kind of concessions, as you pointed out, made by Russians, because Putin's goal has been unchanged. And again, it's not you saying, I'm saying, we're not speculating. We're simply following the official line of Russian propaganda. Ukraine doesn't belong to the world map. Ukrainian statehood must be erased. Ukrainian nation must be assimilated. It's not my fantasy. It's not even my interpretation. I'm simply translating from Russian to English what is being said on Russian television on 24/7. And all the recent statements of Russian officials from Putin from top to down, so like Lavrov, for instance, they offered no indication of any meaningful change in Kremlin's position. But this is, official. This is everything that we can see on the surface. Maybe there are some secret negotiations behind closed doors. I would not trust Trump, of course. I would not trust Witkoff and Kushner, who are there just to make money. It's all just, about doing business. But if Zelensky says the documents are almost ready, that's a very serious statement. And hopefully Ukrainian resilience, the heroic resistance and strong political leadership. Actually, I have to praise Zelensky for his today's speech in Davos, where he scolded Europe. Bluntly talking about European inability to play a decisive role in this war. So with this strong political leadership, so Ukraine proved to be a very tough nut that Putin couldn't break, and maybe there is the kind of a deal that is going to be made. But even if we have a pause, because I don't think that the war, if we're talking about a war as the concept of Russian foreign policy, the war not just against Ukraine but against the free world, the war against the liberal world order, the war that is for Putin is a desperate attempt to bring us back to the days where the might was right, and unfortunately Trump shares this concept. So, but this war is not going to be over. because it would continue somehow. And I think that Europeans should be scared that if Putin's armies get a recess in Ukraine, they're not going back to Russia. They will be looking for new targets. So that's why I think, and that's my unchanged position, the war will last. This global war between forces of freedom and tyranny will not end before Putin regime collapses and Putin pays for all his crimes.
Yeah, Garry, you're right. I was watching the speech of Zelensky, and after this speech, he gave an interview to international journalists. And you know what? A lot of European journalists were saying, why are you so critical about Europe? Aren't you afraid that we will not give you enough of help if you are that critical about us? And I was like, but his answer, was quite smart. He said, listen, you have definitely a strong leaders in Europe, but you have a weak one. And trust me, by 2030, Russia will have much more, more people in the army, much stronger army, and much more equipped. That's what he said. And trust me, he will test again, not only Ukraine, but other than Ukraine, he is going to test some of you and the weaker from you. So, yeah, but I think that Ukraine is, we don't have, Garry, that much international stages for Ukraine to speak publicly. So Davos is just one of those international stages.
No, I agree, but while, I try to avoid any criticism to Zelensky's speeches, but I think that his vision of Europe probably was too complimentary. I'm far more critical of Europe. I understand that Ukraine depends on European help, and this is the Europe now. It's after total failure of confiscate Russian money, absolute political failure. It's a shameful inability, I would say political impotence of Europe, also multiplied by the greed and hidden commercial agenda, mainly of France, that was behind this campaign to preserve Russian frozen funds. So Europe eventually came up with this $90 billion 2 years loan for Ukraine, which Ukraine so badly needs. But at the end of the day, Putin is not going to wait until 2030. This is wishful thinking. Yeah, it's probably, Zelensky didn't want to scare Europeans, but Putin's army ready to attack anytime. And when the NATO is counting the Russian losses, actually, I tweeted yesterday making comments about General Secretary of NATO Rutte's boasting that, Russia lost so many soldiers and it's built. Yes, my tweet was, NATO was built to fight Russian aggression, not to count losses inflicted by the third party. And the fact is that Russia is stuck in Ukraine is not because Russia is that weak that some in Europe prefer to claim, but because Ukraine proved to be too strong. And imagine that if this army, released from its war engagement in Ukraine, moves elsewhere, how long other nations can survive? I don't believe there's any single European nation, maybe Finland, may sustain the same pressure as Kyiv and Kharkiv and other Ukrainian cities today. Having Russian drones in hundreds, swarms of drones and missiles attacking the civic infrastructure. NATO is yet to make a decision that Russia is an enemy that must be defeated. And without a very clear statement about war goals, you cannot manage it. And defense is not a way to stop Russian aggression, because clearly any deal, if it's reached with Ukraine under Trump auspices, will help Putin to rebuild his armies, and he'll look for other targets. War is the oxygen for Putin regime. There's no way that Putin can protect his legitimacy in Russia without continuing this war. And I repeat, not just against Ukraine, but against the free world, against Europe, against NATO. So that's why the war will continue. And Ukraine is it's quite ironic. It's not that Ukraine needs NATO now. NATO badly needs Ukraine. Because if, God forbid, something happens in the Baltic region or Poland, if these countries being attacked, the only army that can help, to defend these nations that will not single-handedly be able to repel Russian attack. And of course, nobody is expecting America to take part in this battle. So Ukraine remains the only real military force in the region to check further Russian aggression.
The global attention, actually, speaking about Davos again, the global attention is drawn to Greenland much more than to Ukraine right now, to Russia's war against Ukraine. And Greenland's, right now, let's be honest, it's hypothetical question, not a real war on the planet. And if to treat Davos as as a mood check among all the European and Western countries, that's kind of a worrying that they are just so quickly switched their attention.
Politicians are looking for something they can solve, and Greenland is something where they could score some points. Because yes, with all Trump threats, and we understand Trump needs a deflection from his domestic problems, mainly from Epstein files. I mean, he's willing to start a World War III, just not for the files to be published. We all have reasons to believe that there's so much compromise there that it may prove to be too much even for Donald Trump, who is just ability to survive scandals. So for Europeans, defending Greenland, it's politically or as they say militarily, it's a big topic. And of course Zelensky made fun of them, saying, "Oh, sending 40-50 soldiers to Greenland, it just makes no sense militarily." But it's all the game. It's they score points. They rally public support, which, by the way, there's a public support because Trump is highly unpopular in Europe. So that's for them. It's a way to undermine or just somehow to compensate their total impotence and inability to act on Ukraine.
That makes sense. But does Trump's interest in Greenland somehow amuse Russian dictator Putin?
Oh, look, no, Trump is operating for Trump. I mean, with Trump, we don't have to look for some, secret reasons. It's always about benefits, personal benefits, benefits for his family. So it's about enriching Trump. It's basically money and glory. That's it. There's nothing else. I mean, there's no interest of America. It's everything he says is just, it's a smokescreen. I guess, there were talks. People pointed out that Ron Lauder, as the billionaire, the heir of the Estee Lauder empire, so who convinced Trump that Greenland has huge, potential minerals. It could be like a gold mine for American businesses. Yeah, and also it's a good political way to undermine the problems that we discussed, domestic problems, because it's pushing so-called America First agenda, and now it seems that the cost to be paid by dealing with Europeans was too high, and Trump is backing off. It's not so unusual, but again, it's a deflection. The real battlefield is Ukraine. What happens in Ukraine, what is happening now, what will happen in 2026, will have a tremendous impact virtually everywhere in the world, from Taiwan to Nicaragua, from Belarus to Zimbabwe. So the future of the world very much depends on the outcome of this war. And it seems to me that the war also will force certain reforms. I don't know how deep, but there will be reforms in the European Union, because Europe has to reconsider all its priorities. That's the positive of what Trump did. So he just illustrated that Europe can no longer rely on America. Europe can no longer continue its rotten policies of bringing immigrants and basically losing its identity. And neglecting its defense mechanism. So Europe is going to rebuild its military, or actually not rebuild, to build its military. And that's again, we are moving to a very different world. We'll see how much European nations can actually reconsider and reorganize their politics, both domestic and foreign. But it's also a collapse of these traditional far left policies that always, were very friendly to anything that was anti-Western and anti-American. So that's why we saw very little, if any, criticism of the massacre in Iran, of Maduro's Chavez-Maduro dictatorship in Venezuela, and of course the never-ending support for Palestinians, which is basically support of the terrorists that have been funded by Iran and Russia.
Right. Yeah, Garry, speaking about actually New World Order, I also, would you excuse me, I would refer to Davos conference again, because there was...
You have all the world leaders sitting there, so
the world leaders, Canadian Prime Minister, and he was quoted, Václav Havel. He was the last Czechoslovakian president, the first president of Czech Republic. And many began talking about this living in a truth versus living in a lie. So do you feel that the world is slowly preparing to accept dictatorships, even, to absorb their narratives inside Western democracies?
Look, it is not a very simple, black and white dichotomy. If we look at the human history, the history of, speaking about democracies, about Europe and the United States, over the last 150 years, we always, see the same cycle, that the technological progress creates more wealth, more prosperity, but also more disparity, the growing social tension. And then in democracies, it leads to the rise of the forces on the political left, demanding the social justice and fair distribution of benefits. And then, either these forces being integrated in the political system, as it happened in America, in Britain, and it basically became a model after World War II in Europe, with these center-right, center-left parties, basically, shifting the ball and always looking for some sort of consensus and common ground. Or it moves too far, as it happened in Russia, for instance, Russian Empire in 1917. Or it was happening in Germany in the 20s, also with the rise of the far left communist groups. And the response to that was always the rise of the powerful force on the other side. And that's fascism. Fascism always comes after communism. So this is the far right always follows far left. And statistically, when you look at Spain, Franco, and Civil War, or Hitler versus Ernst Thälmann, the German communist, or today Le Pen versus Mélenchon in France, or MAGA versus BLM, Vogue in America, it's always 2-1 in statistically in favor of the far right, because they have better appeal to the center, to people that are stuck between two extremes, but they always shift rightward, because it gives some sort of comfort about, because it's based on traditions. So the rise of Donald Trump and the rise of the right-wing parties in Europe, far right, it's very much result of the failed policies, absolutely failed policies of the far left. And when you say lies, but Biden administration was lying also. Obama administration was lying. It's not that Trump invented these lies. Yeah, I don't want to waste too much time, looking at the foreign policy of Obama, but the Iranian deal was a lie, based on a big lie. Obama wanted America to walk away from the global stage. Okay, he did it, maybe out of naivete, but fact is that he started the retreat. He missed his chances in 2009 in America, or 2013 in Syria. It's during Obama years that Putin recognized that he could do whatever. It's during Obama years Putin took over Crimea and started war in Ukraine. So it's not that simple. Yeah, and I think it's very important for us not to be swayed by one or another. So I'm equally critical of any extremes, and I believe it's very important for us to rebuild the free world on the values that made us so successful, without being shifted, to far in one side or another.
Garry, do you agree with the statement that everybody is spreading, that after situation with Maduro in Venezuela, after Iranian protests and their leader ready to run away from the country, and after Syria, do you believe that Russia is really losing an influence?
Russia is losing influence, but not because of Maduro, not because of Iranians, not because of Syria, but because Ukraine survived, period. The main reason why Putin lost his influence he exercised before is because Ukraine refused to capitulate and defended itself and proved that Putin was not all-powerful. It's very clear. Speaking about lies, the free world, Biden, Scholz, I think Scholz was there, Macron, they're all willing to give up in 2022. We all know that. This is not a secret. All they offer to Zelensky is basically, we can offer you a life in exile. So you, like Tikhanovskaya now, you have to get out. They were not willing to fight. It's Ukrainian heroic resistance and political leadership, I emphasize it again, that changed the balance on the world stage. Now, regarding this as Venezuela or Iran, we still don't have the decisive outcome.
No.
I'm in favor of direct intervention. I think that America could and should take an active part in Iran. Trump, by the way, promised the help was on the way. That's what he said. He betrayed Iranian protesters. Tens of thousands have been killed and arrested in Iran. We're not yet seeing the decisive outcome because the free world is still paralyzed by its indecisiveness and also by the poisonous far left ideology. It's, as I said, it's when you look at the mainstream media that has been overloaded with the fake news from Palestine, from Gaza. It's all of a sudden, they just, they're either silent or they pretend that it's the tragedy in Iran, the massacre, the genocide that caused by the actions of Ayatollahs is something that is not that important.
Garry, maybe my next question is naive, but can the international system function without a power that enforces the rules?
Look, it's a philosophical question that requires many hours, if not many days, of debates. But the answer is, of course, not. It may not be the brute force. It may not be an agreement. It may not be the balance, like in a Cold War. But it should be something that prevents powerful players to violate the agreements. So historically, I think this is the first time when this kind of agreement has been reached was in 1648 in Europe after 30 years war. That was a religious war. And it ended up with the recognition of the major powers then in Europe that there's their national states, their borders. It was a primitive concept, but at least there was something that regulated the life and political relations in Europe in the 17th century. And then every century we had at least one major realignment. Like, after war for Spanish succession, the war mainly between France on one side and France and Spain and Britain and Holland and some of the German principalities. So then there was another agreement. Then, of course, Vienna Congress in 1815 after Napoleonic Wars. Then the League of Nations. But again, no agreement can actually last forever. And I think the problem was that after 1991, the end of the Cold War, the idea of United Nations, the idea of institutions that was in position to freeze conflicts, not to solve them, was no longer viable. So relying on the United Nations, basically, just to turn to be into favor of the bad actors, of dictators, because they use the United Nations as the platform to advance their cause. And basically, Putin ruined or illustrated that the world order was a fake. What's happening in 2014, and I'm not even talking about Georgia 2008, because there are many other moments where Putin's actions were bordering violation of international order. But 2014 Crimea was the end. After 2014, the United Nations became just, it's a joke. For me, it was a joke before, but 2014 illustrated that this organization was not a problem solver, but actually a problem itself. And the fact is that the United States and Europe pretended that they could still operate through these institutions. And by the way, nothing happened with Russia from 2014 to 2022. They were, yes, they suspended some membership, but then brought them back. So they acted as if they had rules. And for instance, now the whole story about Russian frozen funds is also based on the assumption that we have to play, the free world, have to play by the rules. What the hell? There are no rules. And Donald Trump is another, example. So he demonstrates that there are no rules. It's just, it's the rules, again, they have to somehow create a balance. And there is no balance yet. So we're going through the period of lawlessness. And sooner Europe recognizes that, it has to start playing, hardball. So better for all of us. Because at the end of the day, it's the unconditional surrender of the forces of chaos and dictatorship could offer us a chance to start building new world.
What's still surprising me, how Europe is reacting on Donald Trump's words. Why do so many leaders seem reluctant to speak to Donald Trump in the tone he often invites? Why does everyone default to careful diplomatic language at a moment when it feels like, alarm bells should be ringing?
You just said leaders. So can you be more specific? Because I don't see leaders. I see managers, the elected managers. Leaders for me, it's Winston Churchill, Charles de Gaulle, Konrad Adenauer, Ronald Reagan. Those are the leaders. Are you telling me Macron and Starmer are the leaders?
One of them.
No, come on. It's a joke. It's a joke. Clowns. Let's be honest. Merz could be a leader, but he missed his moment because of Angela Merkel failed rotten policies that turned Germany into subsidiary of Russian energy, and also she wanted to control it just even after her retirement. So Merz missed his chance to become chancellor 6 years ago, where he could make a great deal of difference. He's trying now. He's the only one who deserves, some benefits of the doubts. I mean, look at Rutte. It's the former prime minister of Holland. He's the general secretary of NATO. I mean, the guy is just, is a bootlicker of Trump. It's our daddy. It's a joke. This is not the way, you deal with a bully. Actually, the prime minister of Denmark, Frederiksen. So she took a strong stand.
I like her.
Absolutely. No, but again, there's some strong stand. When she's probably the only the only politician with balls now in Europe when you look at others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved the former president of Estonia, Kersti Kaljulaid. She's also the one with the balls.
No. Look, this is the Nordic countries and the Eastern Europeans. They definitely have a very different idea because I would call it genetic memory. When you look at Lithuanians, Estonians, Latvians, Finns, Swedes, even Danes, and Poles. There's the historic, memories that have been accumulated over generations that made him understand that there is no peace with Russia unless you are strong enough to repel any Russian aggression.
Garry, finally, going back to the new world order, could Ukraine take on a leading role in shaping a new world order? What kind of leadership could Kyiv realistically offer to the international system?
I think it's undoubtedly Ukraine will play a major role. It's one of the strongest armies in the world. I would say we still can consider America the strongest army, though this is not being tested. There's tons of weapons, but we don't know how this weapon is going to add perform on the battlefield. So we have two armies that prove to be most effective, is Ukraine and Israel. But Israel is just having small regional war. Ukraine is the only army that learned how to fight modern war. And I think there's this unique experience of being part of the new technological war, the war that is changing everything. I think there's the era of the aircraft carriers and all this, the mega projects that's dominated the Western military schools for decades. It's over. I'm not sure that the modern planes can actually survive, a new generation of drones. So if you have a plane worth $100 million and being, attacked by 10 drones, each cost of $10,000. I'm afraid that that's not a mathematics that can sustain. So I think Ukraine has a lot to offer, and I will not be surprised if Ukraine definitely will become an integrated part of this new global structure that it must be built, because we learned one thing after the end of the Cold War: the evil doesn't die. It can be buried for a while under the rubbles of Berlin Wall, but eventually it sprouts out if we lose our vigilance. And Ukraine is absolutely an indispensable part of this new world where when democracies, when the forces of freedom and liberty will illustrate to the rest of the world, to the forces of authoritarianism and tyranny, that we are vigilant and we are ready to repel any attack and inflict a devastating cost to any aggressor.
Absolutely. As my friend and journalist Kaylin Robertson said once, just a few days ago, that the most vital and interesting and important things, not interesting, but just important things happening right now in Ukraine for the future world. So, yeah, that's true. Garry, thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure. It was such a pleasure.
And again, strengths, and now these days, we all wish that Ukrainian weather will be merciful.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.